I actually usually weigh about 135, so that's why you don't get to know me. Enjoy Dan's talk? So I have to tell you, as a speaker, there are a couple spots you get real nervous about. For some reason, I always get stuck with the after lunch, which is the hey, everybody's sleeping from too much food. We have awesome talks every year. I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to get as good as last year, and this year we had to reject some really, really good talks. Stay till the end today. They are all worth it. All right, before we get with Chris, which this is going to be a great talk, I got a couple giveaways. Again, we will be announcing the giveaways for the vendors before lunch, and please go to the vendor to get your prize. It gets really tough otherwise. CTF will open up at 11 o'clock. We will announce the winner. It will close at 5 p.m. At that point, we will announce the winner. Please go to the parameter booth when you realize that you have won, and we will mail you your black badge. I screwed up and left it at my house. So, all right, a couple giveaways. They're all for me.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, just so you guys know, you know why we have that free time? Because we're always running late. All right, hacker stickers. I have a $100 gift certificate for a Howard Sui. TSUI. Is Howard here? He's like, I'm not going to come unless you say my name right. All right. Joel Barnett. All right, Joel. Again, go to Hacker Stickers. They're a great sponsor of ours, and they have some really cool stuff. Awesome. Congratulations. All right. Yeah. Oh my God. We have so much stuff here. All right. Hacking, the art of exploitation. Again, this is from No Starch Press. Liz McKisson. Is Liz here? Man, everybody's down at the casino right now. They're like, why is everybody under the age of 90? Major Sergeant Cole Jimenez. Well, he got called into duty. Nathaniel Carroll. Hey, there we go. Congratulations. And our lovely our lovely hostess is giving us our next from Hacker Stickers, a shirt. A shirt. It's not a toothbrush this time. For Rod Copeland. Is Rod available? Rod is not here. Uh-oh. How about Robert Fisher? Robert Fisher, come on up. You're the next contestant on You Got a T-Shirt. And by the way, go as long as you need to today. Go as long as you need to. There you go. And then another T-shirt. Is a Stephen Berg around? Stephen Berg. Oh, there is Mr. Berg. Congratulations. And then finally, two more books. The Car Hacker's Handbook. It will teach you how to change your oil. Tammy Spellman. Is Tammy available? Come on up. He's like, I have all of my stuff. Come on, man. We don't got all day. Chris is going to use your system to show evasion. There you go. I know. And then finally, Black Hat Python. This is a cool book. Wiley Baines. Is there a Wiley Baines? Hey, Wiley Baines. His real name is Wiley Baines. He goes by Chuck. Welcome to Black Hat Python. All right. Our next speaker, I'm a fanboy of quite a few of these people. I'm a fanboy of this guy. So, Chris Truncer, I got to finally meet Chris last year at my Hack Miami. I don't even remember when that was. Oh, it was 2 weeks before ShowMeCon last year. I got to meet Chris at that point. We have been using at Parameter quite a few of his tools, including Veil Framework. If you are not familiar with Chris, you've probably been familiar with his work. If you're not familiar with his work and you're doing pen testing or red teaming, you are not doing it right. So Chris is a previous sysadmin turned red teamer. Currently works for Mandiant and is a previous Black Hat instructor. He currently works on a wide variety of projects, including Veil Framework, Eyewitness, Just Metadata, and Egress Assess. Chris thoroughly enjoys manipulating technology and teaching everything he knows to anyone interested in hacking. Chris has spoken at B-Sides events, ShmooCon, Sans Hackfest, CarolinaCon, Hack Miami, and currently writes about security at ChristopherTruncer.com. Guys, this is going to be an amazing talk. Please give it up for Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay, awesome. So today I'm here to talk about the art of AV evasion, or really what's become the lack thereof of such an art, because you don't really need to have to do anything extra special to do it, unfortunately. So Dave just gave a great introduction, so I'll skip over this quick. Just as he said, I'm a previous systems administrator, now a red teamer for Mandiant. I'm a proud Florida State Seminole, and I'm an open source software developer where I work on a bunch of different projects, as you can see. So it's been fun trying to learn how to write code while trying to break stuff at the same time. So what's this talk about? Today I kind of want to go over stager background, or basically a background about how stagers work. I'm going to try to keep this part kind of short. It's the only fairly technical part, just to give some information on this is how they work, so that you can understand how we actually try to bypass antivirus with stagers. I'll give a quick description about Veil Evasion's AV bypass approach, talk about when we got our first signature, an experiment I conducted, and then kind of this whole idea of creating a process, which I'll get into later. All right, so stagers. Again, I'll try to make this pretty quick. Dan gave me some sage advice the other day, like he said earlier, that the only good talks are ones that have graphical memes in them. So here you go. I'm trying to start it. Yes, there you go. All right, so stagers. These are kind of what we can commonly refer to as stage one. This can be output from tools like MSF Venom or Veil Evasion. The goal for stagers typically are to introduce or inject shellcode into a process or into memory. And this shellcode can do whatever you want it to do. So typically, when people think about this, it's like, all right, let's get Meterpreter, download it in memory, and then run it. So this is what people commonly use it for. However, you can have it pop a message box. You can have it speak to a user. You can create a user account. You can do a bunch of different things. So these stagers really can do anything like that, but stage one is commonly referred to like your loader, where you're downloading your real malware. So the cool thing about stagers is that any language that has the ability to access or like interact with Windows API or like Windows functionality can be used to write a stager in. So, I mean, most people commonly think of like when I'm trying to exploit Windows systems, like writing C, C++, C#, Go more recently, whatever sort of language that there is. But those are kind of like your standard Windows development languages. But now you can do this, you can interact with the Windows API with languages such as Python, obviously PowerShell, Ruby, And any language that has the means to talk with that, you can write a stager in. So this is cool because this can open up a lot of different options in what you want to write your code in. So interacting with the Windows API, or like with Windows functionality, really isn't that scary. And to create like a Windows or a stager, it's only 4 function calls that you need to write. You can probably write a whole stager with everything included in Python in about like 7 lines of code. So it's not overly complex. The basic idea behind how this works is you have a program that starts, obviously. The first thing that it does is it allocates memory within the program to put shellcode into it. After you've done that, after the memory has been successfully allocated, you copy the shellcode that you want to run into that previously allocated memory and just place it there. Once that works, you're just creating a thread within your current process and say, hey, I want you to execute shellcode that starts at this location and run it. And then finally, the last part to it is you don't let your program main just exit because your thread's still running. And if your program main exits, then your thread's going to die. So we put in kind of like a blocking call, essentially, that states, do not continue on past this thread until the thread is completed execution, then exit the main program. In a nutshell, that's completely what a stager is. So when you create like MSF Venom or Veil Evasion output, that's exactly what the program does. It allocates memory, it copies the shellcode you want to inject into place. That shellcode then is run, which downloads Meterpreter. And then what keeps your Meterpreter from just exiting instantly is that blocking call that says, hey, don't exit until you actually kill your Meterpreter session, let's say, or beacon. And then once that's done, go ahead and close it out. So this is the kind of dry or technical part, but I wanted to go over it just so we can understand what we're calling. The first function is what's called virtual alloc. There's a couple different functions that also do similar things, but this is the function that allocates memory within your current process. And so so it takes in a couple different parameters. The 2 main ones that are probably most important are how much size should it allocate? So this is essentially how big is this shellcode that you want to run within your process. And the other part is like what permissions should be assigned. Like, do I want to enable this process to write shellcode to that allocated memory? Like, well, yes, obviously, because we're going to have to do that. Do I want it to be able to execute code in that memory? Yes, obviously, we're going to need to do that because that's the whole point of this stager. So we just assign certain permissions. Right now, Veil just gives it everything, which is read, write, and execute. This next one is the RTL move memory, which is what actually moves the shellcode into that previously allocated space. The main thing that this takes is just like a pointer to that virtual alloc output. So like virtual alloc gives a memory pointer that says, hey, you have all this memory allocated now, so now go ahead and stuff your shellcode into there. So that's what RTL move memory takes, is that, hey, where do you want me to copy this data? It takes that output and then copies data into it. Create thread is the call which tells it to, what do you know, create a thread executing that shellcode that you just copied into place. And then the last function that we do, which is kind of that blocking call that I referenced, is wait for single object. And wait for single object is where you basically tell it, hey, don't exit the program. Let the thread run. So in most cases, let Meterpreter run or let Beacon run or whatever it is that you want it to do. And just sit there and wait until that thread is completed. So once you've exited Beacon or Meterpreter, then it says, okay, go on to the next line. And typically that's just the end of your program, and then your stager dies. So, just to give a quick heads up, I just tweeted all this slide deck out. So don't stress. I have like code snippets in here, so you can download it and see this. So if it's kind of a little hard to see, I apologize, but that's why I put it out there so everyone can see it. Oh god, that's really dark over there. You guys got lucky over here because you have a lighter screen. At the top, so this is basically just the shellcode right over here, and this is where we're telling it, hey, all of this shellcode here is what we want to inject. And so what these arrows then point to are exactly what I just referenced. C-types is the library in Python that lets me talk to the Windows API. And then each one of these 4 arrows is exactly what I just referenced, is virtual alloc. RTL, move memory, create thread, and wait for single object. And so this, in this entirety right here, this is line wrapped, but this is probably about only 7 lines of code. And with just these 7 lines, you can take this program, basically wrap it into like a Windows executable using something like PyInstaller or py-to-exe, because this is in Python. And then this is your stager. This will download Meterpreter or Beacon or whatever, inject it into memory, and then you have your session coming back. So you can usually write these pretty quickly, and it's nice because it's not a ton of different code. I think it's kind of intuitive, where it's just, hey, I need to create space, write my code to it, run that code, and then that's it. All right, so real quick, let's kind of talk about how antivirus tries to approach catching malware. AV largely kind of tries to detect malware based on like 3 main different methodologies. Signature-based is one of them, and this is the one that Veil Evasion tries to combat. Like, we don't claim, and I don't say that we try to beat heuristics or crowdsource or anything else like that. Signature-based is what we do. So this is where, AV vendors will try to write a signature like, hey, if you see maybe these function calls in a certain order, one after another, or if you see, like, if you look at a disassembled layer, maybe they have different signatures that they've written at that level. However they do it, it's a static signature. And this is what is the easiest to bypass, because simple, quick modifications, which I'll show later, completely bypass signature-based detection. Heuristics-based is nice, or a little bit better, because this is actual behavioral-based analysis. So it's kind of looking at the malware, the program as it runs, and it says, hey, does this do anything fishy? Like, they're looking, hey, does this allocate memory? Does this copy shellcode into space? Does this run it? If they're looking for something like that, it's a little bit harder to bypass, because it's the behavior that you need to have done, or that you need to do in your malware, short of writing your own custom malware that doesn't do DLL or shellcode injection. And crowdsource is kind of this whole newer way that we're starting to see, which is kind of like reputation-based. Does anyone here have like Symantec endpoint protection, or have used it, seen it before? Kaspersky, maybe? Sometimes when you when you first install it, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to be part of the like cloud network, or do you want to submit information back to it? So like that botnet, antivirus vendor, the way they like to do that is they'll try to start collecting data about maybe your system or the different programs that you're running on it. And the way that these will work is it'll look and see like, hey, does this program that is trying to be run right now, have we ever seen it like any other node in our cloud, or any other like system that's running it? Have we seen it before? Like, when was it last compiled? And so it'll try to make kind of like decisions based off what it thinks is going on, but then it'll query other, like the mothership out there and ask, like, have you seen any information about this? Like, what sort of reputation does this binary have? And so that's kind of like a third way that I'm starting to see a little bit more often with how they're trying to catch binaries. All right, so Veil Evasion's approach to bypassing antivirus. So real quick, before we get into that, there's a couple of different ways that people can do antivirus evasion. So this first one is kind of like ghost code, or like net no operation code. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you are doing, you're going against an AV that's static signature based, and they're specifically looking for you to call 4 functions in a row, one after another. Let's say we're doing it, like if we can talk at a higher layer, in a higher level language, excuse me. So what you can do is you can basically just add code in there that really does nothing. So that, like, the 4 function calls that I showed earlier, maybe right in between those, I have a loop that just goes through and adds 1 to itself 10 million times. So this code does nothing. It has no net operation on what the overall objective of this program is, but it may interrupt the sequence of functions that signature is looking for, and then because it doesn't match anymore, you're bypassing a signature that they have in place. Now this can obviously be done at a lot lower level than just like looking for Python functions. Like they're usually doing it at like a disassembled layer, but that's kind of like the overall gist of this idea. Encrypted binaries are another way. Has anyone heard about Hyperion? Used it before? Cool. I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's a way to kind of like encrypt your binary and then decrypt it on the fly. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. The best way, as any offensive, or anyone I'm sure in IT knows, to bypass AV is to just write your own custom code, like what Dan did. Like if there was any AV on there, I'm willing to bet as much as I have that nothing would have caught what he wrote because he custom wrote it. There's no signature for it. And they're probably not just able to dynamically on the fly inspect the behavior of everything and know with a high level of assurance that something's malware. Custom code is your best bet to get around everything. So if there's one takeaway from this, it's that. So the main thing is there's obviously multiple different ways to bypass antivirus and how to approach doing it. The way that we do it is a couple different ways. One is through obfuscated code, where we may have like function calls within like our Veil modules that, let's say that they're looking for shellcode, a signature. And so shellcode is your typical hexadecimal letter system, so it's not like G or above. Let's say we start and do a letter replace on, if you see anything letters A through F, I'll replace it with like Q, S, T, something like that. And so that would be what's in the static code. Like if you were to strings that file, you would see all these random letters that make it look like not shellcode. And then at runtime, we have a function that goes back and then actually, hey, all of those letters that are weird that shouldn't be shellcode, replace it with these real values, and then actually execute it. And so then we go back to at runtime in memory, have valid shellcode, and can run it. Another way is just base64 encoding your data. Like it sounds stupid, but you wouldn't believe how easy it is doing something tiny like that can bypass AV with your program. We also have encrypted code in there. So, one of the main functions that it seems like everyone uses is like AES encrypted code. And so we have AES encrypted shellcode within our payloads that are decrypted at runtime while it's running. And then the other biggest thing that really led to Veil's success is the use of non-standard languages for Windows binaries. And so this is what I was talking about earlier with being able to use any language that can hook into Windows functionality. So some of the languages that we support, I think I went over most of these, is Python was kind of the original, one of the main originals that we supported upon release. We obviously support C, C#, but then the other different ones are like PowerShell, what we added in, Perl, Go, and Ruby. Like Python and Ruby, like these are probably non-standard languages that people are you're not going to write code in that usually if you're trying to interact with a Windows system. It's usually more Linux, maybe Mac, something like that. So the one thing that we noticed right away when Veil was released was that using a language that's not C or C# or C++ made a huge difference in what AV was catching or not. And we think it is because AV programs didn't really know how to properly inspect non-standard languages. They've got C down. They know how to look at C#, but they didn't know how Python works or Ruby. And so it made it a lot harder to make a decision on a program, hey, is this malicious or is this not? So a quick example is C flat. I'll go over flat in Python. By the way, it's just a quick thing on Veil modules. We call stuff like flat. Well, what I mean by that is that it's literally just those function calls, and I'll show you in a sec, that I just talked about. There's no obfuscation in it whatsoever. There's no encryption. It's literally probably the easiest one to catch in the world. And the reason we actually still develop those and make them publicly available is in case anyone wants to have an idea, like an example of how it should look in that language, we make it available for you to look at it. So then if you want to build upon that and add different sorts of obfuscation or encryption on top of it, you have a baseline that you know works, and you can just attempt to modify that code. All right. Wow, that is really dark over there. I'm sorry, guys. So this is basically a standard C program. Like up here, just your headers. We're defining different variables that are right here. And then this is the shellcode that we're looking to inject right here. And then down here are those 4 function calls that I just talked about. And so this is the virtual alloc. This is RTL move memory, create thread, wait for single object. This is a stager that's written in C. This is that same exact stager, which I just talked about, that's written now in Python, where it's literally the same exact function calls. We're still doing virtual alloc, RTL move memory, everything like that. It's the same exact functions that are being called. The only difference between these two programs is one is written in C, one is written in Python. So you would think, naturally, the C is caught instantly because AV knows how to look at that, and they've seen this before. And the main thing that we found is by simply changing the language that the code is written in from C to Python, it completely bypassed all signatures. And we're talking the same exact function calls. It should be, like, behavioral-wise, the exact same thing. But AV doesn't know how to look at that. They didn't know how to inspect Python-based stuff, and so they just immediately assumed that it was a clean file, and that was it. All right, so I wanted to write a new module that we could try to release here. It's been a little while. Our typical goal has been to, like, the 15th of every month, we call, like, a V-Day, and we try to push out some new module for it that'll help bypass AV. And so it's been a little busy with life and 2 kids, so I haven't had one out in a little while, but so sorry about that. But I have a new module that I wrote that's actually been fairly successful. It's Python-based, and I just released it 10 minutes before this talk. So it is released now. So, all right, the whole idea is, I talked about Hyperion before. Hyperion is this kind of cool concept on how they try to bypass AV. The way that this program works is you give Hyperion a file that you want to protect. And the way, what it does is it takes that file and completely encrypts it so that you can't open it at all without obviously decrypting it and running it. Well, what Hyperion does is it doesn't store that key, the decryption key, anywhere. How it actually works is it artificially constrains, like, the key space of that key. So let's say there's 32 this module that I released uses a 32-bit character key, or 32-character key. Let's say it has, just to make concept easy, 28 letter A's as the first part of the key, and then the last 4 part of the key are just 4 random numbers. So what Hyperion kind of does is it uses what it knows is an artificially constrained key space, and it brute forces itself the second you start it running. And so it'll try, hey, is the number 1 the valid key? No? Okay, let's go to the number 2. Does that work? No. Okay, does number 3 work? Yeah, hey, that works. So number 3 works. That's our key that we can add in to the rest of the key. And then now let's decrypt this whole function and then actually run it. So it's cool because the key is never contained within the file at any point. It only works by brute forcing itself on the fly. So I was like, hey, this is a kind of nifty idea. Let's see if we can, like, write something like this in a higher level language. And my first go-to, which is probably because it's easiest for me, is Python. So the only problem that I discovered with this is it's usually, I like to, like, try accept my way through certain things. And I thought initially, hey, that could be a pretty easy way. Like, let's try decrypting this function. If it works, then awesome, we know we have the right key. If not, catch this exception and then just go back up and start over, essentially. That's not the way encryption works in Python. You don't get an alert if you put in the wrong key. You basically just get garbage output. And so I tested this by, again, this is in the slides, so don't worry about seeing it too much right now. What this basically does is this code from, like, Code Koala that I just adapted. And to test it, it was like, hey, I just encrypted the literal word password with 1 key and then tried decrypting it with another key just to test this out. And what do you know? Up here you see me telling that, hey, I'm printing it out. This is what it's encrypted like. And then in this red box is where I try to decrypt it with the wrong key. And it's just unprintable, like, ASCII characters because it's just garbage text because it wasn't decrypted correctly. So we never, like, you can't try accept your way through this trying to find the correct key. So I needed to have some sort of way to figure out, okay, how can I go this route, find if what I have is the right key, and then if I know that it's the right key, move on to try to decrypt and run everything. All right, so I'm running what I believe is called a chosen plain text attack. I'm sure if there's any cryptographers in here, you can probably tell me how I'm wrong. So someone talk to me after that if that's not exactly what I'm running. But the overall concept is, let's say I have known plain text that I control. I put that plain text through whatever encryption machine it's called that creates encrypted text. Now, if I try to decrypt it, I already know what the plain text should be. So I can run some sort of a module that basically, hey, if that decrypted text matches what I think it should be, then I know I'm in the correct, I have the correct key, and so move on. So basically, a small mod of this is what I wanted to do. And so a quick high-level description of how this works is, let's say I'm starting with like 1 to 1,000,000 or whatever I put up here. I'll start with 1. Hey, if I use 1 as the key, does that match what I expect the output to be? If not, no, start over. Now let's go to 2. Does that match? No, start over, go to 3. Does that match? Hey, maybe 3 does match. So because 3 matches, I know that that's what the proper key is. Let's then go ahead and use that key to decrypt the shellcode and then inject that into memory. And so this is a real quick, obfuscated version of what this code looks like. By the way, this is what Veil outputs for the source code. And as you can see, variable names are just random garbage. This is the worst time in my life whenever I have to debug Veil output, because I try to look at this and I have no idea in the world what it takes me probably 5 to 10 minutes to figure out, okay, what is each piece of this, name it to something that I can understand, and then start trying to actually debug it there. And so the way that basically this works is this thing at the very top is the first part of the key right here. And then I'm basically going through and using these numbers as my artificial key space. And I'm just looping over those numbers. And so I'm starting at 100,000 to 1,000,000, I think it is. And so I basically say, hey, does this plus 100,000, use that as the key? Does that decrypt my actual, my string that I'm looking at, which is right here? So this random thing. If that variable, when decrypted, equals this, then awesome. I know I have the right key. Go through, decrypt my shellcode, inject it into memory, and then run it. If that doesn't match it, go back up, start over, give me a new key. And it basically just does that until it finds the correct key. And so it's cool because you can put this on a system, run this as a Windows executable, and you'll see the computer go through, because it's iterating through every single option, trying to find what the proper key is. And all of a sudden, maybe after 20 seconds, you'll get your shell. And you have because you found the proper decryption key and it works. All right. So at one point, we started getting our first AV signature. And it was kind of an interesting process. It was probably about a year after we released Veil. So Veil went untouched basically for a year. No one was catching anything of any module that we wrote. And then actually in our IRC channel, someone sent us this link, and they're like, hey, I think someone actually tried to write something for Veil. And we're like, oh, really? So let's see. And what do you know? Here's what we have. We got this page sent to us. And so I was pretty excited. I was like, I want to see if someone actually figured Veil Evasion out. It's an open source tool. Anyone can look at this code. Antivirus people, I'm sure, have the ability and hopefully have looked at it. And so we wanted to see if they figured, okay, is there something stupid that we're doing that we can modify so that antivirus can't catch us? But the reason I wanted to look at this, because previous attempts to catch Veil or classify Veil has been kind of humorous. For example, McAfee has their site URL, what they think it is. They actually say Veil Framework, that our tool is a sports website. So it's kind of interesting on how they're going through and trying to classify. So it's kind of okay, how are they going to do this on the AV evasion side, trying to catch us for what we do? So I then started to figure out, okay, this is the specific update I need to have. Let's go through and start trying to test out Veil Evasion and see if our modules that we're creating are actually getting caught. So, God, I wish I made this brighter for you guys. I'm sorry over here. This is that exact same Python code that I was talking about earlier. So the exact same thing from earlier in this presentation, and it's just the shell code. It's the function calls that I have. and everything right here, and it's just not obfuscated in any way or encrypted. So, does anyone have any idea, like if you were given this as a task, what kind of would be the first thing that anyone would maybe look at? Any guesses? The first thing I did is what I saw is, look, ctypes is this library that I have that allows me to interact with the Windows API. So I kind of need it for this program. And all of these little arrows that are in here is everywhere that ctypes is actually referenced in the code. And so it's just in there a ton of times where maybe they figured out, hey, if you see this library being referenced like this amount of times in there or something like that, it may be a veil evasion stager. And so I like to start simple. Like, I don't need to necessarily go through really complex stuff. I just want to see like if tiny modifications will actually get stuff to work. So this is actually, oh, thank God it's white. This is what the actual module looks like for within Veil code. This is what we create when we're writing a new module. It looks something like this. We're basically at the very top here. This is where we're saying, hey, create me some of that shell code that I'm going to use for the payload itself. These are where we're just like getting random names for variables that we're going to use within it to make it look like garbage text. And this is that actual Python code where it's like, hey, use ctypes, have virtual alloc, all those function calls that I went over earlier, because that's the meaning of the code. That's what makes it work. So I was kind of like, well, let's just change one thing. Python has this ability to use what's called aliases. And so ctypes is in here, and ctypes is being referenced everywhere. Well, I can do something like import ctypes as Chris, and then I can basically just straight find replace ctypes in the code with Chris. In this case, I was like, well, this is going to be stupid. Let's see what happens here. And let's just replace ctypes with AVLOL throughout the entire code and kind of see what happens. So this is the actual diff that from my code change. And I was like, all right, let's create a payload and see what happens. And so right here, you can see I've replaced it with AVLOL throughout the entire code. And so this was then Windows executable was created. And what do you know? No issues were detected. This is how they were actually trying to signature it, is just something incredibly stupid and tiny like that. The tiniest modification of the library name instantly allowed us to bypass what they were trying to do to catch this Python-based payload. And we put that out, and for the people that were actually let us know that they started getting caught, 10 seconds later after they updated that, everything was bypassing everything again. So it was kind of humorous because it was just tiny, tiny modifications can allow you to do this. So this is actually what it looks like now. Gosh, sorry. We no longer use AVLOL because I'm hoping that they started to figure that out. And we're importing, but we are using aliases still. So you have ctypes right here, and then this random string that looks like garbage variable, and that's what's being referenced throughout it. And so every time Veil runs, it uses a random letters and numbers, and then of random length. And so it may be either 4 characters or 10 characters with just garbage stuff in it to try to, so that there basically can't be hopefully a single regex that's written to catch something like that. All right. So next up, once I started trying to prep for ShowMeCon, I wanted to look into creating a brand new bypass for different stuff that was for a new module that are out there, or for existing modules to bypass everything. And I started looking into this, and I immediately was disappointed with Avast, and how Avast is trying to signature Veil. So I was basically told that Veil was being caught by Avast. So I was like, all right, let's check. This could be a cool thing to look at. Let's see if we can figure out and research it. And so the first thing is what did I try? So I generated a single payload with Veil, and it was caught. So I was like, okay, what if they're catching just the shellcode that's inside of it and nothing else? So let's make a module that has no shellcode at all, just the actual function Windows calls in there, and see if that works. Well, that was caught. It's like, okay, so this is kind of nifty. So maybe let's try renaming this old trick of ctypes to a different variable name, and let's use extra length, because right now it's maybe because if it's only 4 to 10 characters, I said, let's make this like 14 characters or something beyond like how it normally works to see if they were trying to catch something static like that. And that was caught. Excuse me. So the next thing was, okay, let's start commenting Windows function calls that are in here. Like that's that whole virtual alloc, the RTL move memory, create remote thread, everything like that. What do you know? I started going through from one of them to all of them, commenting them. And that was caught. So I'm kind of like, well, they're kind of doing something here, which is interesting. It was starting to make me really want to get into this and figure this out. At that point, I deleted everything in there. I basically made a hello world script from Veil and then generated that and wanted to see what was happening. What do you know? A hello world was actually being caught as malware by Avast. So this is incredibly stupid in my opinion because it's not a virus. It's just something that prints out hello world to the screen. So I wanted to test this functionality out in Windows. I was like, all right, all these like Python payloads are getting caught that I'm generating. Like what's going on? Like what's kind of like the signature they're doing here? Because it just seemed really odd that something like hello world was getting caught. So at that point, I obviously had a test bed of like different Python source code that I'd use to see if it would work to bypass AV. And I wanted to see, all right, let's try compiling in Windows. And because right now, the cool thing about Veil is, or I think, is that it'll generate everything within Linux, so you don't actually need to have a Windows VM. So let's see what happens here if we do this in Windows. What do you know? Simply just changing the VM that I compiled this Python script from Linux to Windows, it completely like bypassed their check. They had the same exact code was working and it was said not to be a threat on Windows. So this kind of led me to a couple different thoughts that we're trying to figure out like what Avast is doing when they're trying to catch Veil essentially. I wasn't sure, so I wanted to basically figure this out by, let's just generate a Windows binary that's not within Veil, that doesn't use Veil in any way, that just, again, is a hello world, but do it just on Linux just to see what happens. And that was caught. So this basically led me to believe, and I learned a couple different things, that Avast is taking this shotgun approach to try to figure out how to catch AV, like malware, by blacklisting all binaries that are made by PyInstaller and Linux. And actually, to give a little background, the reason why we chose to use PyInstaller on Linux is because it's actually used by legitimate applications. We thought there's no way that any antivirus company is going to actually start blacklisting a program that's legitimately used by others in the industry as a means to catching malware, but that's exactly what Avast is doing. So I think it's kind of a shotgun bad approach, but the other main thing I learned is, hey, next time you need to bypass AV, just do it in Windows. Just write it in your Windows VM and then compile it there and you'll be good. All right, so my last kind of thing is, thank you, Dan, is I wanted to come up with a quick experiment for Veil and test different antivirus vendors out there. So what I wanted to do is generate most of the payloads that are currently within Veil Evasion. And I wanted to test every single one of those payloads against multiple different vendors, but ensure that the ones that I see most often on my tests are actually included in that list. And this is something that like myself, Will, and others have been talking about doing for a while, but we just haven't done it yet. And so the main thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to differentiate between binaries that are detected, binaries that are suspected to be viruses, and then ones that are clean, that AV thinks is perfect. And then it was going to be record the results. So the main AV vendors that I started testing against were Symantec, McAfee, Avast, Microsoft, MSE, Avira, AVG, and ESET. The ones that I typically see in my environment is when I go to test places are Symantec or McAfee. So that's why those are in bold, because I wanted to make sure to include those. So does anyone have any predictions? Kind of results? Yeah.
They basically didn't use the right signature, so you didn't get caught.
A lot of that. Well, I guess we'll see in just a second. some of the predictions that I had when going into this was that generally I thought most modules were going to bypass AV. I knew, and I know that a lot others that are there are going to be caught, but I thought most of it would. Like I said, I think there are some that are going to be caught. The ones that I thought were going to be caught were going to be the C or C# based payloads because that's what AV knows best. I also thought some of those flat modules that I referenced would also be caught because they're the ones that have no obfuscation in any way. They're just the function calls that are there. I thought Python-based ones, since they are the original ones, were likely to be caught. And I thought newer languages like Go or maybe Ruby would actually bypass antivirus because AV hasn't had as much time to really look at those and figure out how they work. I thought the pure stagers were going to bypass AV, and those are ones that actually, to give a little background, they don't inject shellcode of any kind. There's no shellcode within those files. The way that they work is they're purely written in whatever language, so PowerShell or Python, and you can basically recreate the same exact functionality that shellcode does within those languages, such as Python, so you never need shellcode. And so I thought that maybe these pure ones are probably going to get bypassed, or would bypass AV because there's no shellcode in it, and they don't necessarily make all the same function calls that those do. And overall, I thought PowerShell wins. My general approach when I'm on assessments is I always go PowerShell first if I need a stager or something like that, because AV doesn't know how to inspect it. It's always a whitelist. 99 out of 100 times, it's a whitelisted binary. That 100th time, you just bypass their app locker to actually still run PowerShell anyways. So I thought PowerShell was going to be how we can actually win. It's going to be the easiest. So one key point is the ability to detect an open source virus as a single data point, like to determine which AV product to buy, probably isn't your best decision. So like these results shouldn't be used for an AV test, but it's not a bad supplement either. This is an open source virus that's out there that probably should be getting caught. So this is the results. I tested a bunch of these different payloads here. And these were the different AV vendors that I tested against. And looking at it right now, so the key essentially is green is obviously good, yellow is potentially suspect, and red is what was caught. And Perl, unfortunately, I was having a problem actually getting that working at the moment. And so I wasn't able to test that, which is why you see nothing there. So this is kind of like designed to be, anyone can use this. There's a link in my slides which links right to this. So whenever you're on an assessment, if you want to know what will work against whatever AV vendor you're going against, check out right here. Kind of what I found was 48.7% of all payloads that were generated and tested against all AVs were able to bypass AV and were not caught. 13.4 were listed as suspect, which the AV didn't know if it was good or bad, and 37.8 were caught. So here's some kind of trends on the different stuff. These are the different payloads that I tested against, and we have what's good, what's suspected, and what's caught. And this is where you can actually start getting to see what works well against different vendors and what doesn't. And I have some like wrap up on this that I'll highlight some of the bigger things. And then these are from an AV perspective, like what did each AV actually catch? What did it think is suspected? And what does it actually think is good? And it wasn't a virus at all. So my main observations from this, where I'm going to wrap this part up, is I thought there's a lot of interesting information. Of all the payloads generated, almost 50%, so it was what, 48.7%, were still bypassing AV and were determined to be virus-free. The Ruby base64 encoded payload is the least detected payload across every single vendor that's out there. I think there's only one or two that were there that actually caught it. The C# flat payload is the most detected payload. So if you need to bypass something and you can't do PowerShell, my first choice is now going to be base64 encoded Ruby payload. C# flat is going to basically be the worst one I'm never going to choose. McAfee is the worst at detecting AV evasion, veil evasion payloads because had maybe like 2 or so detections. And the surprising thing to me was AVG was actually the best. And I didn't necessarily expect that was going to be the case. I would have thought something more along the lines of Symantec or McAfee would have been the best. But AVG was the best at catching it. Some other observations, and this kind of on the crowdsourcing, this is to more specifically speak to Symantec, is that crowdsourcing like these sort of things using their cloud program can be a good detection option, but it was going to rely on a couple different things. Like it's going to rely on how many computers are submitting to like their mothership. Like how are they actually determining, have a good basis of information to make risk-based decisions. Also, how does your configuration, the configuration of your system respond? Like, does it only flag something if it's low, medium, or high? Like you can have all these great different things that catch it, but if it's only configured to do it when it's of high certainty that it's bad, then your like cloud-based or crowdsourcing version of this is kind of worthless and not as helpful to you. So quick wrap up then on a lot of this was that antivirus isn't a brick wall. Like the tiniest of modifications can bypass antivirus, which is obviously shown by that C types and just replacing with AVLOL to bypass everything. AV vendors are human and make human decisions when trying to figure out how to create a signature for a product or a different piece of malware out there. So we can exploit this and try to use this to actually bypass something. Anyone here really can develop some new way to bypass AV. Like, seriously, it's pretty easy. It's not all that hard. I'm really not an expert at this at all. Like, it's making the tiniest of modifications, you can just do it and it'll completely bypass stuff. And it's super easy to set up like VMs that are running different types of antivirus vendors in it or antivirus solutions in it to test and see if it actually worked. All right, so I want to kind of end with this for developing like a process. I approach antivirus basically, antivirus bypassing the same way that I kind of approach red teaming environments that I don't know. Like I see stuff all the time when I'm red teaming that I've never touched before. Like, and I need to learn how to abuse it, how to break it, how to misuse it in some way to actually be successful on my assessments. And so I think it's important to develop, everyone to develop like your own process for interacting with technology or AV signatures that have been created by vendors for things that you've never encountered. Like the point of my whole talk was to go over, this is the process of how I've done everything. This is how I created this module that I just released that's bypassing AV. This is how I've bypassed this signature, and I tried to show each of the steps, the steps that I took along the way. But these are all things that I didn't know at the time. I have my own process when I'm seeing stuff to like teach myself and try to make myself successful when doing this. So, and I don't know who said this. I'm sure it's not just me. I know it's not just me. Other people have said something along the same lines. But like, I think a big difference between an experienced professional and someone kind of new to the field is that someone that has that experience is confident in their abilities and their methodology that they follow to go into an unknown environment and test stuff, whether that be devices, AV signatures, whatever it is, and come out confident knowing that my methodology or like how I teach myself and how I learn will allow me to be successful in what I do. So I really want to have people hopefully start working on their own methodology and how they try to start figuring out what they do and how they learn to enable them to come out successful in these kind of unknown environments or stuff where they're testing things. They just don't know how it works. And that's a wrap. That's basically it. If there's any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, everyone, thank you for having me here. Questions?
We need to give a better round of applause for Chris. Come on!
No. Thanks, man.
Who's all sufficiently scared? Who all's dropping all their, who all's going to go and read?